this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. We're talking sports, entertainment, and sports entertainment, all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. We are really close to the start of the college football season, guys. 2 conferences left to preview. This week, let's focus on the Pac-12. Show of hands, before doing research for this segment, who honestly remembered the Pac-12 championship game last year featured Washington beating Utah 10-3? Anyone? Really?
Liar.
I wrote a preview on it. I wrote a game preview, a betting preview on it. I'm a Pac-12 guy. Big Ten, Pac-12 all the way.
So East Coast to West Coast. The Huskies, with losing a close Rose Bowl game to Ohio State on New Year's Day after that, the conference as a whole went just 3-4 in bowl games. Washington State, Stanford, and Oregon were the 3 winners, and they won their bowl games by a combined 4 points. Taylor, does any team jump out at you from the Pac-12 this season as a front runner, at least for a conference title?
Yeah, I think Washington has to be the front runner just kind of by default. They and Oregon look like the best teams in the North Division, I think, by a pretty decent margin. Anytime Oregon has a good quarterback, Justin Herbert. Anytime you have a guy like that, that's an NFL potential number 1 pick, you kind of stand out, especially in a weak division like that. Washington gets them at home, though. And I think just on balance of the entire schedule, Washington has an edge. They also get Washington State at home. Washington, I think, only has 2 defensive starters returning, which I think is kind of a red flag. But, just on balance of the whole schedule and just there's not much else there to like. So I think it comes down to really that Oregon-Washington game. I would take Washington right now. In the South, Utah looks like a pretty clear favorite. They have a pretty weak division overall. UCLA has 9 defensive starters coming back, so they could be a little improved, but there's not much else that stands out in that division either. So I could see a rematch here where I think Washington would be just kind of by default the favorite.
I'm going with Oregon. I think the Ducks are going to return to prominence this year. Herbert is going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate. He looks like a stud. He's tall, he's athletic, he's got a strong arm. He can move around in the pocket. He's finally the quarterback they've been wanting and needing for the last couple of years to run that offense. I have a lot of concerns with Washington on offense and defense. I think they've lost too much leadership on both sides. If Oregon stumbles, though, Washington still has enough talent to potentially take that part of the Pac-12. In terms of the South, I don't see any team being a playoff contender in the nation. In fact, the only team I see being a playoff contender is Oregon, and that is based on how well their quarterback plays. They're known for being a team that scores a lot, goes up and down the field. So defense isn't something they have to be as concerned about, but they are bringing back some talent on the defensive side of the ball, which should help, especially if they get into a track meet with other teams. Maybe their defense outplays the other defense. I'm not concerned about Washington as much, or even Washington State. I think both of them lost too much in terms of quarterback play. They lost their leadership from the quarterback position. Justin Herbert is going to be the best quarterback in the Pac-12, in my opinion. And I think that's going to be the difference. In that system, they'll put up 30-plus points a game on average. They'll blow out teams. They'll win the style points. They'll move up the ranks. I don't know if they can make it to the playoffs, but if there's any team in that conference that has a chance, I got to go with them.
I do agree that if there's a team that's going to make the playoff, it's going to be Oregon, but I don't know that they're even the front runner to win their division. I just think that in order for a team from the Pac-12 to be able to go 11-1 and make the playoff, you have to have the name recognition. Washington at 11-1, Utah at 11-1 would not get a bid over Georgia or a number 2 from the SEC or an Oklahoma or a Big Ten champion. So that's where I agree with you. But Washington does have a very solid quarterback, at least what we think. We haven't seen him play with the Huskies yet. Jacob Eason, transfer had to sit out a year, redshirt junior. They had a really good team last year. Oregon does have that great offensive line. They've got a fantastic quarterback. I agree Herbert is probably the best quarterback in the Pac-12. The South is bad aside from Utah. And the Utes do have a few pieces. They've got a quarterback and a running back, both returning from injury. I think they missed the last 4 or 5 games of the season. Tyler Huntley at QB, Zach Moss at running back. Their head coach, strong, Kyle Whittingham. So I think that Utah comes out of the South. I don't think that we're in a situation where these teams are going to be – this is going to be the conference for the third straight year that gets left out of the college football playoff. I just don't see a path for – I don't see Oregon being good enough to go 12-0, and I don't see any of the other teams I don't think Oregon's going to go 11-1 or 12-0. They might win 9 or 10, but that's probably about where they are. And the other teams are going to have to run the table if they want a shot at the playoff, because non-traditional schools don't get let into the college football playoff with even really good years. You have to be perfect, and even then, sometimes they leave you out for another team from the SEC. So Oregon's the only one that I think has even a remote path, and I don't think they're going to be on it. Taylor,
I think any team – sorry.
I was going to bring you in on it because you wanted to talk about the playoff.
Well, I think any team out of the Pac-12 is going to have to go undefeated, even Oregon. So, just because of the quality of the other teams in the other conferences. We know Clemson's making it. We know Alabama's making it. Probably a Big 12 team, Oklahoma, maybe Texas, maybe a second SEC team like Georgia. Then you have Michigan and Ohio State in the Big 10. So there's just too much other quality for a one-loss or two-loss Pac-12 team to get in, I think. I do agree with your big-name argument about Oregon. If there is one Pac-12 team that could potentially get in with a loss, it's them. I just don't know that they would still. Like, would they take an 11-1 Oregon team that wins the conference over, Oklahoma with the same record in the Big 12? I doubt it. So I really do think they'd have to go undefeated, and I can't see any of those teams actually going undefeated. So I think there's a pretty slim chance. If there's anyone, it's Oregon or Washington, but I don't think any of them get in.
I agree.
I don't see getting in either. But I do like Oregon's quarterback. And in a system where quarterback play is key to making a run, at least to winning your conference or to the playoffs, they at least have that component where really nobody else in the Pac-12 has a quarterback that's even being talked about as a potential Heisman candidate, save maybe Utah's quarterback because he's dual threat.
Well, this is not related to the Pac-12, but we do have to mention this because this sparked up on Twitter yesterday, a day before we were recording this. We have to mention Ohio State's quest to trademark the word "the," as in the three-letter word that I've already used 2 or 3 times to this point in this little phrase. There is so much to unpack with this, so many different directions to take. Taylor, go, I guess, because I don't really know how to set up any better than that.
It's just a very Ohio State thing to do. Like, it seems like they just live to kind of annoy everyone that doesn't like them. It's also not their first foray into this. They've tried to trademark Woody Hayes in the past, Urban Meyer as well. They've trademarked Script Ohio and The Shoe to put on merchandise. It's just, I don't know. It's very them to want to put "the" in big block letters on a shirt or a hat, and it's very their fans who actually want to consume these products and potentially spend money on a shirt that just says "the" on the front. So it's not the most shocking thing to happen. It's nauseating. It's Ohio State, but I can't say I'm surprised.
This is just one more reason why I can't freaking stand Ohio State. I'm a Penn State fan, grew up in State College, went to Penn State, always going to be a blue and white fan, but I can't stand Ohio State. Even taking my bias aside, when you have things like this, when you have the controversies with Urban Meyer and their coaching staff, and just you go back over the years over the different scandals or so-called incidences off the field, it just drives you crazy. It's like, here's a program that just runs wild whenever they want. And then they have the audacity to believe they can go trademark one of the most common words in the history of English language. If that's the case, like, I'm coming up with a list. I want pizza, I want football, I want sports betting. Like, I'm going to start trying to trademark all of these and seeing if one sticks. Because if Ohio State can get "the" or "the," if they can get either one of them, I got to be getting something too.
I think there's a distinction. I honestly do. And I say this because I grew up in South Florida. I went to Florida State, but when I grew up, I pulled from Miami because I grew up in South Florida. And I had a shirt 20 years ago that literally said "the you." It had the University of Miami U logo, and it said THE above it. Now, for Miami, it's the, but for Ohio State, it's the. So I wonder if there is a legal distinction because, I mean, to start a clothing line, that would be the clothing line and just put the across the front, THE. It's not putting the across the front. I wonder if there's a distinction with that. Because
at least the U is unique.
The U, but they're not trying to trademark the letter U. And if they did, that would be unbelievably hilarious. But I do also.
They're not as obnoxious as Ohio State to try and trademark a letter.
What I do like is I like Michigan's response. Their social media team posted a giant block letter of trademark because they are U of M. And it's the whole idea of trademarking a word that is so common, because I do get that it's associated with the Ohio State University and in the context of Ohio State University. Okay. But I mean, if the Saints were unable to really win their deal with Houdat because the fans kind of came up with it, I can't see Ohio State winning with the.
They tried to trademark OSU a couple of years ago, and Oklahoma State spoke up and fought them on it, and they eventually agreed just to both go by OSU. So they've lost before in these kind of battles. Hopefully they lose again.
It's funny because I don't think you have to trademark it for something to be associated with it. Oklahoma State to me is always OK State. In the same way that Southern Cal is USC and South Carolina is USC East, if you want to even abbreviate it. I'm pretty sure Gamecocks fans hate that. The idea of USC and then a little E at the end. It's like it's an electric car or something. But, yeah, that whole thing is just very random and very Ohio State. Let's talk NFL. We've already previewed the East Divisions and the North Division, so this week let's move to the South. NFC first, where the New Orleans Saints were the only team to finish the year over 500 in 2018, finishing the regular season tied for the league's best record at 13-3. Their season, of course, came to an end in controversial fashion against the Los Angeles Rams in the NFC Championship game. Rick, can a team like Atlanta bounce back this year and challenge the Saints this time around, or is New Orleans going to be strolling to another division title like they did a year ago?
I think all three teams are going to challenge the Saints this year. I honestly believe this could be the toughest division in the NFC with the additions they've made in the offseason. You start with Tampa Bay. Bruce Arians coming in there with that offensive system, changing the culture. He's going to put Winston in a position to succeed. It's going to be an aerial attack. They have the weapons all around Winston to succeed. They're bringing in talent on the defensive side of the ball. I think Tampa's going to improve by at least a couple wins over last year. Carolina, Cam Newton was pretty much banged up at least half the season. He missed the last couple games. He's going to be fully healthy going into this year. They've got one of the best weapons in all of football in McCaffrey. They've added some more pieces around them on the offense. The defense is going to be healthy again. Like, that team's going to rebound. And then you get to Atlanta. Their offensive line looks improved. Freeman will be better, healthier and better at running back. They're going to have more weapons, be more explosive. I don't expect the Saints to be as great as they were last year. I don't think they'll go 13-3, and I don't think they're going to be competing in the NFC Championship game this year again like they did last year against the Rams. I think the Saints will contend for the division, but I'm not sold on them yet. They got plenty of talent, but come on now, Breeze is 40. He can't – we say the same thing about Brady, that he can't continue to play at that high level. But we can't have two guys in their 40s saying they can't continue playing at that high level. Bridgewater has looked good. Kamara is going to be a beast. The Saints will have a lot of firepower. But it doesn't happen in that division on a regular basis where teams win back-to-back division titles basically on a regular basis. I think Carolina and Atlanta are going to challenge the Saints. I think Tampa's going to be a really tough out this year. I think the whole division is going to be a lot better and possibly the toughest division in the NFC. I don't see the Saints cakewalking through it. I'm not even sure yet they're going to win the division.
Yeah, it's hard for me to bet against the Saints, but it's hard for me to want to bet on them at minus 162, considering the depth in that division. The team I like a lot is Carolina. They were 6-2 last year before Cam Newton got hurt. Like Rick said, he's presumably back and healthy. They've switched to a 3-4 this year. Ron Rivera's calling the plays. They added Gerald McCoy and Bruce Irvin to the defense. Assuming Cam's healthy, they have Christian McCaffrey, who's maybe the best two-way back in the league. There with Saquon. DJ Moore was an unheralded rookie last year. Greg Olson's still one of the better pass-catching tight ends in the game. There's a lot to like on that team. And I think at plus 400, I'm seeing to win the division, that's a really good value.
Oh, yeah.
Atlanta at plus 325 too, but I think I would just take Carolina, at slightly better value. I don't think the Saints should be a minus favorite just because the division's so deep.
Yeah, the injuries from last year, I mean, it's kind of skews the numbers a little bit. We know that Atlanta can compete with who they've got. We know that Carolina, when Cam Newton is healthy, Cam Newton is a fantastic quarterback, and he changes. We saw it with that record that Taylor brought up last year, the difference between the Cam Newton Carolina Panthers and the not Cam Newton Carolina Panthers is dramatic. So if it's Carolina led by Cam Newton for 16 games or even 14 or 15 games, they should compete. Tampa is going to be an interesting one, Rick. I don't know if I would go – I could see where this could become the trademark Ohio State University toughest division in the NFC if that works. Tampa is one of those things that I'll believe it when I see it a bit. I'd be a little bit more hesitant to kind of put them in contention before I would say Atlanta for sure, Carolina if Cam's healthy. But let's go to the AFC South. This division was a bit more competitive a year ago. And in fact, it was the only division in the NFL last season that featured 3 teams above 500. Houston Texans went 11-5, Indianapolis went 10-6, and the Titans went 9-7. Jacksonville Jaguars finished 5-11, and then all they did this offseason was add former Philadelphia Eagles QB Nick Foles. Taylor, how tightly contested will this division be in 2019? Is the South just the toughest geographic, adjective for a division in 2019?
I think that's a fair claim, but it's different than the NFC because I think the NFC South has 3 Super Bowl contending teams. The AFC South maybe has 1, but that one, the Colts, has big question marks already because Andrew Luck's already hurt again. So, they're the easy pick to win the division if he's healthy. He was great last year. They looked great in the second half once he found his footing, but it's hard to go all in considering he's already dealing with a calf/high ankle injury. And they're once again being kind of sketchy about it, which they were with his shoulder for a couple of years. So I would pick them if there were no question marks with him, but there are. The Texans have plenty of talent, but they live to disappoint me. So I can't possibly go all in on them either. Tennessee with Mariota, we're waiting for him to stay healthy. I can't believe they were over 500 last year because that's a team that I don't remember anything about. But I don't really see them. Huh? Oh, yeah, they did.
Uniforms, yeah.
Derrick Henry had a 99-yard touchdown run, I think. So there's your one memory. Jacksonville is interesting because they were kind of the trendy pick last year, and they fell on their face, but they upgraded quarterback without question. I don't think Nick Foles is the greatest thing in the world, but he's certainly an upgrade over my boy Blake Bortles. So I do think Jacksonville is a little interesting as an underdog, but I would stick with either Houston or Indianapolis. My heart says Houston, my head says Indy, if Luck's healthy.
Just like with the NFC South, I'm going to proclaim this is going to be the toughest division in the AFC conference. When you stack them up compared to the other divisions, there are 4 playoff contending teams now that Jacksonville has a reliable quarterback. This is a quarterback-driven league, and although I think quarterbacks are, one of the weakest positions on the field other than punters because they just sit there and throw you can't even touch them anymore without flags coming everywhere. You can't even play a game of football half the time anymore. But with that said, let me put that aside. It's going to come down to the quarterback play in this division. All 4 teams are going to have good defenses. Indy's improved their defense. All 4 teams are going to have good rushing attacks. Marlon Mack's is going to be a stud this year for Indy. And all 4 teams have good offensive lines. Indy probably having the best offensive line. But when you look at it, Watson was hurt for Houston. Luck has been hurt for Indy. He's hurt right now. Jacksonville didn't even have, Taylor and I could have went out there and done as well as Bortles and the backups did. And then Mariota tried to do everything he could to kill Tennessee's chances of even making the playoffs. So when you put it all together like that, you have to say that it leans towards Houston and Indy because they have a little bit more talent at the QB position than the other two teams. And then it comes down to the health of Luck versus the health of Deshaun Watson. I've been flip-flopping on these two because I'm a huge Andrew Luck fan, but without him, they have absolutely no chance of even having a winning record. The Colts have already proved that. Houston might still have a chance. I really love their trade for Duke Johnson. I think that's going to be a great pickup for them. A healthy Fuller teaming up with Hopkins means they can't double-team Hopkins anymore. And then Houston's defense. That pass rush is going to be phenomenal again. But if we're going to start talking defense, then you got to look at Jacksonville's defense because 2 years ago they were the best defense in the NFL. Last year they were just on the field so much. You get my point? This is going to be the toughest division in the AFC from 1 to 4. Tennessee will be better than the Raiders, then the Bengals, and then the Dolphins. Right there, that puts that division higher than the other three. If Luck is healthy, you have to go with Indy. If he has any nicks or inconsistencies or misses games, you have to go with Houston. I'm going to take Indy for now, but I can't count on Houston. I actually think Houston will be the wild card and Indy will get the division.
I think that's all fair. Knowing Luck's status would be really helpful in this kind of situation.
Yes.
Because we've seen what the Colts can do with, I almost feel like Andrew Luck could be, day to day for the next year and a half and not play. And they'd just be like, no. We're reevaluating every day because that's just seems to be the way they handle it. But yeah, it's a competitive division. I mean, I do want to ask one thing of Rick though, because he brought up my Dolphins. You don't think the AFC East is going to be an incredibly deep and competitive division with the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Jets?
The Patriots will have 12 wins again. Buffalo have 9, and Jets and Dolphins have losing records.
You think Buffalo's going to win 9 games?
Yes, I think they have a chance to win 9 games.
Whoa.
Watch this defense. Top 10 defense guaranteed.
I mean, the thing is that they're going to have to play each other. So the benefit for the Bills is that they have 4 games against the Jets and Dolphins.
Exactly. That's half their wins right there.
I laughed at Rick when he made that claim a few shows ago, but then I actually wrote about the Bills and their win total prop, which is 7. And I took the over in my article on 7 wins for the Bills.
Thank you.
I can see
it. You're leaning towards 8. 9 is not that far-fetched.
8, 7, and 1. How many ties did we see in the NFL last year?
Yeah.
Over 500, but in a way that makes them basically 8 and 8.
Okay.
See,
it might be good enough for a wild card.
I think so.
It's possible. See, you're getting South Division previews here and a little bit more back into the AFCs. We aim to please, and we give you more than what you're looking for, more than what you're even expecting from us here on the Odds On Favorites podcast. UFC returns to the ESPN Plus pay-per-view system this weekend for UFC 241. It is a stacked card, really stacking up to be a really great fight card here. There are great bouts lower on the card, including Sadiq Youssef fighting Gabriel Benitez. But we're going to focus on the final 3, the top 3 fights from this fight card. In the middleweight division, number 2 ranked Yoel Romero squaring off with 7th ranked Paulo Costa. Romero a minus 150 favorite compared to Costa's plus 120 moneyline odds. Rick, who you got?
Okay, well, I'll just say who I got, and then I'll tell you why. I have to go with Romero here. I've been a fan of his for a while now. I love just how tough he is inside the cage. And, he brings a certain level of professionalism with him throughout the years. And I appreciate that about a fighter. He goes about his business. He grinds it out. He's not afraid to stand up and throw punches. And he's got elite wrestling skills, former Olympic medalist. Here's the thing. Costa doesn't have the same pedigree or even close. He's not a master of any specific martial arts discipline. If I remember correctly, he came in from like powerlifting or something. But if you look at it this way, though, when you typically Romero is the biggest guy when he's end up fighting. He's just hulking looking figure. Costa is about just as big, if not bigger. You got two middleweight behemoths going after each other. Both of them have knockout power. Both of them can drop the hands on somebody and then drop their opponent. So for me, I have to believe at some point Romero has to take this fight to the mat. If he gets punched too many times with the power that his younger opponent's going to be bringing, keep in mind, Romero's like 42 years old and looks just as good as a 28-year-old, 27-year-old, however old Costa is. I'm taking Romero because of his wrestling skills. I feel like sometimes he forgets about that a little too much. He relies too much on the striking. I think this fight is a fight that he can't mess around. He can't take chances. He should use his striking to set up his takedowns and then grind out the victory that way, because he'll get the number one shot. He'll get another title shot between the winner of Whitaker and Israel, which should take place early in 2020. If he wins this, he's right there for another title shot. He's got to rely on what he does best, and that is just grinding somebody into the mat. I'm taking Romero to win this fight.
Yeah, if Costa can stay on his feet, he has a chance. Like you said, they both have knockout power. But if Romero gets him to the ground, it's over. That's his strength. Romero minus 150 favorites, okay enough value where I'd still take it. Like Rick said, he has the experience. He's been there before. I think the odds are such that it's not a great bet either way, but I'd still take Romero just straight up.
I mean, I like Romero too. What I really am excited about with this is that you guys are talking about the knockout power. 92% of Costa's wins have come by knockout or TKO. 85% of Romero's wins have come by knockout or TKO. We are going to see something in this fight because Costa's never gone he's 12-0. He has never gone to a decision. His fights have never gone the distance on it. I believe that 11 of his wins have come by KO or TKO and 1 by submission.
Yep.
That's going to be an exciting fight to watch. And that is the pre-co-main event fight. That is third from the top. In the co-main event, welterweight battle between Anthony Pettis and Nate Diaz. Showtime, a minus 134 betting favorite. Diaz, a plus 104 underdog. Taylor, close to one of the betting lines. Which side do you prefer?
So Pettis is a power guy. Diaz is more of a speed type. I think that pace will give Pettis some issues. If Diaz can avoid taking big hits like to the head or to the abdomen, I think he has a good chance of pulling the upset. I like the value plus 104 you said as an underdog, so I'll take Diaz here.
You know, part of the hype about Pettis is he had a really strong showing against Ferguson last year, and Ferguson is the boogeyman of the UFC right now. He's one of those guys, I've said it before, like I would not want to be in a cage, in an alley, anywhere with that guy once that switch flips in his head. And then came back and he had a knockout over Thompson a couple months ago, and everybody's like, oh, he's up in weight, he's back, Showtime's back, he's looking good. I'm not sure I'm 100% confident that Showtime is fully back. Yes, he looked good against Ferguson, but let's not forget he lost. Yes, he looked good against Thompson, but Thompson's not as good as Nate Diaz, in my opinion. The concerns with Diaz is he's been gone for 3 years. And although all reports say he's been training most of the time, he's in good shape, he looks good, he's ready. He was going to come back previously to take on Poirier, but that didn't come, or that fell through. That didn't happen. So it's not like he just sat on the couch for 3 years. You know, he's got his school still. He trains, he coaches, he does all that good stuff. He's got teammates. So we have, is Pettis really back, or is Diaz, in good enough shape to win this fight? So both have questions, in my opinion. Pettis is underrated on the ground. He's an underrated grappler on the ground. I still give the slight advantage to Diaz on the ground. I have to give the slight advantage to Pettis on their feet because of his feet. Diaz can probably match hand-to-hand striking with Pettis, but Pettis' kicks, especially if he goes for leg kicks, could be a huge difference in this fight. I think Diaz's best chance is like with Romero, is to use his striking to set up for a takedown and then going for a submission like he did with McGregor. If he can do that, I think he's going to win the fight. I like his value. I have a hard time picking against Nate Diaz. I don't always agree with what he says before, during, or after a fight. I don't even know if he's in reality half the time, but he's entertaining because you don't know what he's going to say. He's like the macho man of UFC. You didn't know half the time, better yet, he's like the ultimate warrior of the UFC. You don't even know what he's going to say half the time. Half the things he said doesn't even make sense. Yet, you still want to watch him over and over and over. You still want to see him fight. And you're mostly entertained by it. I have to go with Diaz here. I'm taking him to win this fight. I don't know if he's going to stop it or it's going to go the full distance. Really, we have to get answers from this fight to see where Diaz is at, but I'm going with Nate Diaz.
I think this is a very close – it's a difficult decision to make either way because, there's upside and downside to both. And when in doubt, if you are kind of in a toss-up situation like I am when I look at trying to pick this side, I'd go to the one with more value. Diaz at plus 104 versus Showtime at minus 134. I'd take the positive value on it and go Diaz as well. I'm looking forward to this one. This whole show should be outstanding. But this one, again, it's could be a technical masterpiece, the way that these guys can fight. So we will see on that one. As for the main event itself, the heavyweight championship is on the line. Champion Daniel Cormier defending against challenger Stipe Miocic. Cormier favored at minus 145 to retain. The challenger coming in at plus 115 to become the new heavyweight champion of the world. Rick, will DC be a winner in Anaheim? If the show was in LA, that would have read better. Will DC be a winner in LA? But they're doing it in Anaheim. So,
yeah, I do think DC is going to win this fight. Look, he looked clearly the better fighter in their first match. He's the better wrestler. He can hang in the striking department. He's proven that over his career. He's proven to be just a brick house as a heavyweight. He's compact. He's got mass. He's got low center gravity. He's got all the tools that a wrestler has, and then the striking power. And for his age, he's right around 40 also. He's got quickness still. He's got agility still. He's got all these tangibles that I think are going to be too much to overcome. I know his odds are minus 145, and they've come down a little bit actually throughout the week. To me, that's still value. You have to go out there and outwork the champ if it goes the distance to clearly show you beat him. So he has that advantage. He also has the advantage on the ground. That's two huge advantages, and he's already proven to beat his challenger. Everything lines up for DC to win again, and if the MMA gods can have their way, you get your trilogy fight between Jones and DC after this. I'm going with DC. I still think he has some value. I think the odds makers are undervaluing him a little bit, and I think he's going to win this fight. I don't know if he's going to get the stoppage victory again, or if it's going to go the distance, but I'm really confident in DC winning and retaining the belt.
Miocic has a chance if he can keep Cormier at a distance. I think he's the better boxer here, but Cormier has a strength advantage. He's the better wrestler. As we said about the first fight, if Cormier can get him to the ground, it's probably toast. So I'm not as huge on the value, though. Minus 145 I don't think is great. But like Rick said, if the lines come down during the week, then I guess it's not the worst idea. Miocic was favored the first time and lost, so the value on him is not atrocious either if you think he can rebound. But I think the odds have this one right, and I would just side with Cormier.
I agree, and the one thing I want to bring up is Miocic does have a 7.5-inch reach advantage and is 6 inches taller than DC. So it is impressive, and that goes to what Taylor was saying about keeping him at a distance. Because, over half a foot of reach advantage is staggering, and obviously a height advantage as well. So it'll be interesting to see if Stipe can push it, can keep him at a distance, can end up making it a competitive, make the judges make the decision, or, try to see if he can actually do something to not let the judges make a decision. But I got to go with DC. Minus 145 for a champ of Cormier's caliber, I think are fine odds. It's UFC, and when you're talking about combat sports, it's tough when you get to that 150 mark to say that there's value because one punch and it's over. one slip and you're in a submission and you're tapping. So I get that. But when you have it, Daniel Cormier is Daniel Cormier. It's
he's the pound for pound top fighter in the UFC right now. Like you would think and he already beat Miocic. So you would think his odds would be at least a little bit higher than 145.
Yeah. 145, I'm a buyer. 175, I'm sitting out. But I still think that when you have a champion of Cormier's caliber, you're fine in that 150 range, minus 150 range. I still think there's value. NASCAR returns to Bristol this weekend. It'll be a Saturday night race for this one. Bristol Motor Speedway, of course, the compact half-mile oval track in Tennessee. Rick, which driver do you like for this night race that is going on for NASCAR this weekend? Woo!
You know, this is exciting. This is actually, between NASCAR fans and NASCAR drivers, one of their most favorite races of the year. It's Bristol at night. Like, this is a tradition that goes back generations for NASCAR fans, friends, family. I'll tell you this. I'll be with my dad and my son. We'll be watching it. Second of all, shout out to my son. Went through a really tough knee surgery yesterday. Really proud of him for how well he handled all that. With that said, for me, speaking of family, I'm leaning towards one of the Bush boys to win. Combined, they have 14 wins at Bristol. I picked Kyle to win at Bristol earlier this year. He came through and won at Bristol. Kurt finished second in that race. I think we could either see the same or a flip-flop. And if the Bushes, for some reason, aren't able to, dominate like they have in the past, I'm kind of leaning towards Joey Logano to take it. He's got a couple wins there. He ran strong in the spring there. He's ran strong over the last couple years. But this is Bristol. Like, there's going to be bumping, banging, crashing. It's whoever survives. And the Bush brothers have learned how to survive at this track. Nobody else has more than 2 or 3 wins at this track. Kyle has 8. Kurt has 6. I mean, they're doing something right to win that many. It's hard to pick against either one of them. I'm taking a Bush boy. If a Bush boy doesn't win, then I'm going with Logano. That's my pick.
So this race is called the Bass Pro Shops NRA Night Race, which is about as country as it gets.
Woo!
I'm going to give you reasons why Denny Hamlin is going to win. He's finished top 5 at 5 straight races, including a win at Pocono. In 8 races featuring 750 horsepower engines with no aero ducts, he's finished in the top 5 7 times this year. He has 12 top 5s overall, more than anyone else, and he finished 5th at Bristol back in April. So the fact that you can get him at 12-1, I think is decent value. He's been really consistent this season. So there's my Denny Hamlin take.
Great job.
Jeez, you're busting out like schematics and
great job.
Deep dive, baby.
That was impressive. The half-mile races are always – when you go away from the mile-ish track, if you either go with the really long tracks, a road course, or the little teeny little half-mile, they're always – it adds that little wrinkle that changes it up a little bit. That NASCAR may not be like my choice of watching habits for sports on a weekend, but I appreciate when there's something a little different about it. And going to Bristol is always, if you're going to Bristol, you're going to the Tricky Triangle, wherever you might be going, that's one of those unique courses that adds that dynamic to it when you have something and to have the drivers, I like what Rick was saying about the Bush brothers, where they know how to drive here. And this isn't one of those where all you're worrying about is the embankment, the change of the angle on everything. This is a very unique track. So, Taylor, that was like mind-blowing hearing those kinds of numbers being pulled. But I would side with one of the Bush brothers just because they do know how to drive Bristol. That's just the way it goes. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Make sure to check out gamblingsites.org for more from these guys right here. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check back next week for another edition of the podcast on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. They've been Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. I'm Drew Goldfarb. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.